slightly mind blown and really, really excited to introduce the next session, which I feel like will just be a seamless connection between Vanessa's keynote and this in conversation that you're going to have a chance to witness between two faves of mine. So we're going to hear from an in conversation session between Melz, who organizes from a principle of liberation that asks us all to be daring enough to radically imagine and speculate about the futures we are committed to creating, who will be in conversation with Amahra, who is an artist rehearsing a life-affirming infrastructure and is always inspired by the invitation Abolition presents. They are two leading lights for us in the UK. So I'm really, really excited to be able to hand over to them to be in conversation for the next half hour.
Thank you so much, Farah. Melz, we're here.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody. How are you today? I must admit, like, after catching the end of Vanessa's offerings, I'm a bit like, yeah. How are you?
Oh, how am I? I thought you was asking the people, but no, I am well. I'm grateful. I'm extremely grateful to be here and to talk about a topic that is so deeply connected to my soul and to everything that I believe is possible in life. So yeah, how are you?
I'm good, you know. Well, this morning I woke up and I'm like, I'm all right. Today, now I've been listening to conversations all morning. I'm like, I'm good. I want to talk imagination with Melz. Like, let's go.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I was thinking about just how I was introduced to you and your work through the wonderful Alia Hasina some years ago. We have to big up Alia at any given moment. And there was so much that it was like, I would love to kick it with you and just find out. So I'm grateful for this space. And I wanted to ask you, like, the context that we're here today speaking about is imagination, infrastructuring. Like, what does imagination mean to you? And I guess, how did you come to imagination work?
Yeah, thank you. It's a beautiful question. Imagination just means, well, it means dance with the possible to me. It means being able to like open our minds to like cascade in possibilities of different futures. Like, it just means beauty, both in how I want to talk about it and how it feels as like an embodied experience to engage with imagination. And I feel like for me, I came to it through, I think, so many different directions, but one thing that I can say in a very grounded way is that through being a person that exists at many intersections. So obviously I'm Black, but I'm also trans, I'm queer, I'm neurodivergent, etc., etc. I don't fit into the boxes that this world has designed for me. But at the same time, what I'm deeply passionate about, and if you've had a chance to read my bio, is education. I'm passionate about research. At the moment, I'm a doctoral student at Cambridge, and I started an organization called the Free Black Uni. But education is that thing that puts us in those boxes like nothing else, innit? It says, this is what you need to do. You're going to do it like this. If your brain doesn't work like this, then unfortunately you're going to fail. But it was a deep like passion that I have for like philosophy and for knowledge creation and for like exploring ideas. And so in order to allow myself to get to that space where I can do what I'm passionate about and what I love, I had to be incredibly imaginative. I had to try and figure out what I personally bring, from not seeing all of my identities as deficits, as the world teaches us, rather seeing them as possibilities. And even in that, like, as a trans person, I feel like there's nothing that's taught me more in life than being trans. And I think sometimes we often think about it as like, you just change gender and like, we just need to make sure that like you have rights and stuff. Like, we need our rights. However, I think there's something so beautiful about being trans in the sense that it is the most visceral expression of like transformation to me anyway. And I had to imagine myself anew. Like, each day I had to start creating my gender, and each day I still create it. And all of that has existed in my imagination. And so in short, imagination to me is freedom. What about you?
I'm sorry, you can't just like It's like Wednesday afternoon, you know, it's kicking it to us with the facts and the poetry all at once. Thank you so much for that offering. And I feel really tingly because there's so much in that I would love to. We were joking, like I could speak to Melz for about 3 days straight, and it's no joke. But there's so much in that, and I love has been something that's cropped up a couple of times today, and I am so grateful for that. And I never want to minimize what that means and how that's inherently connected to imagination, how it's inherently connected to systems as well. And I think about imagination different depending on the day, the context that I'm in, my mood, who I'm around. Because there's part of me that's like, I feel like there's part of me that's kind of this idea of so many people throughout time, throughout history, throughout our present, who are engaged in imagination every day, but they call it survival. And I think it's so important that we name all of the reasons why people need to be imaginative, and sometimes that isn't respected and honored. I think that we have to name in that capacity what is also killing us or is escalating us towards premature death. And because we have to name supremacy of all kinds, because we have to name capitalism and extraction and the multiple layers of crisis that all of those things form, for me, it's impossible to talk about those things without coming back to love. And I remember that when we had a conversation earlier, we were kind of speaking about almost like parenting into being, or mothering, and this idea of mothering as a verb that is free of gender, that isn't about, you know, the container of woman or female or, you know, any of that. That's not what mothering is about. And I wanted to, if I can read something that the wonderful Alexis Pauline Gumbs in the book Revolutionary Mothering offered. Love is possible even in a world that teaches us to hate ourselves and the selves we have been waiting to see in each other, except that in a world that says that we should not be born and that says no to our very beings every day, I still wake up wanting you with a yes on my heart. And I'm like, everything that Alexis says, I'm just like, but there's something that's so fundamental to that about us building what we believe, us seeing in each other the capacity for love, us really just yearning for us to be able to love ourselves and to understand ourselves more. I don't want us to ever minimize the power of that in relationship to imagination. So it feels really precious to have a space in which lots of other people are kind of are saying this and articulating this from their vantage points. Going back to that idea that we build what we believe, and we come into that loving presence. I would love to talk about some of the things that you've been building, some of the things that are present with you and in your heart at the moment.
Yeah. I feel like in our pre-conversation again, like we spoke a lot about how as we grow as people, as we grow more in like connection with ourselves, in love with ourselves even, what is resonant continues to change. And I feel like for me at the moment, my biggest priority is myself. And so I feel like there's lots of different kind of stages to life. I've just started my Saturn return, so Saturn is Saturn. But in that sense, what was the most important aspects of imagination to me for the past decade, even for the past 10 years, has been around like grassroots activism. I've been deeply involved in like grassroots activism across the UK and Black Lives Matter UK, doing a lot of decolonial work, setting up the Free Black Uni, etc. But one of the things that I'm realizing is sometimes we often, how can I put it? There's a danger that we can throw ourselves so deeply into trying to transform the world, and we see so many ills and horrific things happening, and we want to do something about it. But then where is the nurturing? Where is the care that we have for ourselves? What happens when we put ourselves on the front line? What happens after that? Do you know what I mean? And so for me, I didn't think about all those things for the past decade. I was just like, I'm outside and I'm here. I've got some things to say, and like, this world needs to change, innit? And like, I'm grateful for that time because it came from a deep sense of like, we deserve better than what we've been getting. But I also realized that I was putting myself in the front line so much and not caring for myself in a way that I need to care for myself. And like, what does it also mean to have license to care for myself as a Black trans person, as a Black queer person, as whoever I am? What does it mean for me to be able to truly, deeply nourish and nurture myself, and for that to not feel self-indulgent? And so where my imagination is right now, what is the most resonant thing for me is like, yo, Melz, I love you, innit? You get me? And like, again, bringing it back to love, innit? Like, what is a radical love ethic? And that can mean different things at different stages of life. And to allow oneself to continue in that fluid process of being true to whatever that means, like, is truly like where I'm at and what I believe. Because I also feel like we can end up feeling guilty and like feeling shameful, like, oh, if I'm not doing this, then like the whole world is gonna crumble. Like, nah, like if you're loving yourself, if you're doing like the best that you can for yourself, especially as like a marginalized person, like that in itself is a vibration, innit? And that in itself like is healing for both yourself and for the world. What about you?
I think I needed this today. JRF knew what time it was on the clock of the world, as Grace Lee Boggs said. Like, everyone knew that we needed this today. Thank you so much. I'm sitting with all that you said, because everybody knows that this is something that I really struggle with, right? The idea of, especially when I think about the infrastructuring, the building, the things that we need to affirm our own lives and the lives of other people who we know are encountering some of the similar things that we have or that we are on our journeys. Sometimes like it's so easy to fall into that, like the martyrdom or the self-destruction, but there's also a part of this that I also feel is it's really different to that. Like, I'm looking at the scale of the challenges, the cascading challenges, the crises that are not just before us, but we're very much in the idea that some people are living through multiple apocalypses all of the time. It's not like the crisis is coming, it's so very here. And some people are feeling the heat of that fire more than others. It gets really hard to, you know, that thing of once you see, you can't unsee. So I'm definitely struggling with where are my own boundaries within this work that I acknowledge as life work. It goes beyond a container of organization, job title, this thing that we set up, this thing. It's also like, who am I as a friend? Who am I as a person? Who am I as a parent? How do I connect with myself before I even think about how do I connect with other people? And in the same way, I think about imagination infrastructuring is like rehearsing into being the life affirming, the systems that affirm life, the relationships that affirm life. I'm also trying to say, well, how do I rehearse into being who I am in a way that acknowledges that constant fluidity and evolution and fuck up and try againness, you know, like how do I do that? And for me, there's something that I said before, I struggle with hope a lot in this work. You know, I set up Maya in 2013, so 10 years old now. And I keep saying 10 years old because I remember studying Black cultural institutions for my dissertation. And, you know, most of them throughout the 80s and early 90s were publicly funded. So when the public funding went, Black and minority-led organizations were the first ones to go. They didn't survive 10 years. And I keep thinking, what is it? We've survived 10 years. What do I want to do? Like, how do I want to now show up in the world? What is it that I want to commit to? And I feel like there's something about being an artist that becomes liberating for me, because it's the idea again of rehearsal. It's the idea of the only things that we can do are practice. We may have some visions, but we allow for those to be shaped and transformed by the people that we're in relationship to, and at the same time with ourselves. So I'm like, Maya is growing and changing and shifting, and we're building, like, we, you know, talking about systems demonstrators, we're thinking about what is it to build life affirming economics, what is it to like practice mutual aid at scale, what is it to think about sort of the grassroots relationship to power and dismantling power, and how do we really stop infantilizing communities and people that are constantly infantilized. With like, the only way to do that is practice, but also because I'm changing, I feel like the team and the ecosystem are in this really interesting space of like, no, who do we need to be to contribute to the wider field? And it goes beyond job title. So I love the fact that even, you know, you offering Free Black Uni into this space, but also that you're not contained to the things that we create. And I think that that is like going down with the ship is such a Western like concept of like, I'm going to stay bound to this thing because I created it, and actually like some things need to transform and some things need to end, and can things be as generative as possible? Where are you in your...
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with everything that you've just shared. Like before I kind of developed the idea of Free Black Uni, I just read Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. And if you can see, there's a Octavia Butler book just over there on my bookshelf.
First thing I noticed, I'm not gonna lie.
And honestly, like that book series was so inspiring to me. And the almost the refrain of the book series is this idea that God is change, in it. And so God being like life essence is essentially how I would describe what she meant by God in that kind of way. And so the only lasting truth is change, is what she says as well. And so in that kind of same sense, like going down with the ship, it's a very Western idea for organizations to exist forever, innit? Like we see like longevity obviously has like its benefits, but not everything needs to be here forever. And like when we reflect back into nature, like the trees, they die every single season. Do you know what I mean? The leaves have to fall in order for a new harvest to come. And so we act in this way that is so anti to nature, and try to sustain things that don't even need to be sustained or don't want to be sustained. And I think it as well comes back to for me anyway, this idea of like non-linearity. Like I don't believe the world is a linear place. Like we're taught that time just goes like this and that's it, innit? But my research actually, so my PhD project is exploring alternative ways to create knowledge outside of the scientific method. And so what that essentially means is that everything that I've ever been taught, I'm just like, yo, let me just put that to one side and explore life in a different way. And so that complicates temporality, that complicates rationality, it complicates fact and fiction. It brings them so in alignment that fact and fiction, they don't exist, innit? And so in that kind of sense, it allows for us to act from a space of like knowledge emanating from somewhere different, innit? It doesn't emanate from outside, it emanates from inside. It emanates from our souls. And so if our soul is telling us to go one way, then oh yeah, I'm going that way. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not here to suffer in this life. I'm not here to suffer in this world. And like what I've also learned, like even when you was talking about like just figuring out different parts of the journey and figuring out what's right to spend time and what's right to spend energy on, for me, that's been a lot to do with like my spiritual practice, innit? And like going down a more spiritual path in terms of my journey. And a lot of the work that I'd done prior was about decoloniality and like decolonizing the curriculum. And then I think it was somewhere in between my master's and my PhD, I said, yo, if we actually decolonize this curriculum, we end up with spirituality, innit? Like we don't end up with anti-racism. We don't end up with like a very kind of material way. And not to say anti-racism is important and like all of these things, they're important, but we don't end up with a material analysis of the world, then we don't end up with something that can just be like shifted and fixed. We end up with something that is so deep in terms of how we perceive the world and how we engage with it. And to me, that is decoloniality. And so that in itself gave me a further license to just be like, everything that we are taught is based on this idea that like, of, I guess, a few Western white men in it. It's based in their imaginations of a few Western white men. And so I was like, do you know what? What makes us any different? Do you know what I mean? Like, what actually makes us any different from the founding fathers of like the knowledge system? And so in that same kind of sense, like, we need to allow ourselves to be free to explore and to express in whatever kind of ways we feel is in alignment. I hope that makes sense. I kind of went a few different ways.
All of the sense, like the book. I feel like there's so much in that, even that you know, because I've been sitting with this. I feel like sometimes we're like overcomplicating something and just trying to get back to love, like, you know, the complex systems analysis and like you say, if we're actually decolonizing the curriculum and in expansive ways and thinking about the curriculum, if we're to actually decolonize, I feel like we always come back to love. I'm trying to love the land better. I'm trying to be in relationship. I'm trying to love myself better in a world that is so violently trying to prevent me from loving myself, from so violently preventing me from trying to love you and love the land and love, you know, acknowledge us or more than human accountabilities, detach us from that spiritual, you know, and sometimes because we adopt these sort of colonial frames, we then have separated the spiritual from the pragmatic. We've separated the poetic from the pragmatic. So we're over here like, I think that we just need to do this. I think that we need to build infrastructure from this spirit. I think that if we detach this and we move this, we get to spirit. And then the world or the sectors that we find ourselves in, no, because I need pragmatic things. I'm like, I just gave you a pragmatic thing. I just gave you a pragmatic thing. Or the other thing was about resourcing, where so many people are like, oh, you know, we can't relate this work or this type of thinking that you're really in and embodying to a budget, or like, or there are people who are like, I can't fundraise and put these things in, these are the things that get stripped. And I'm always like, yeah, but my people in the ends are doing this is the kind of work. And when I say communities are infantilized, I say I've learned more about economics, I've learned more about solidarity, I've learned more about the systems from the ends than I've learned from school, then I learned from, you know, the sector, then I've learned from where the power is perceived to lie. Like, I feel powered by the people in my immediate, in my day-to-day. And that's where I'm like really excited, because I feel that there's a precious alignment in what we share, maybe, that is, we're not fighting those who are doing the anti-work, but both of us are proposing propositional work. Both of us are offering propositions of, I think when we tap into spirit, maybe it feels like this. Maybe there's a time where we create something and it feels like Free Black Uni and it serves this purpose, and we're not preoccupied with legacy as a thing because we're operating in different temporalities. Or maybe when I tap into this, or when I change as a person, that it has another context, it has another manifestation that feels like love. I always talk about the things that I'm trying to build. They don't come from the precedents of the arts and cultural space that I find myself in. They come from my granddad's yard. I want to build infrastructure that feels like my granddad's house. I want to build things where I've accessed love, and I want to see that we can collectively build these portals so that more people can see, like, yo, what do you love? What really speaks to your soul, what really speaks to your spirit. And I love what you said about this idea of like transitioning through the work that we're doing, the work that we're building, through who we are as people, as finding a home for the soul. When you said that, I was like, Melz, get out.
Did I say that?
You said you're channeling, I think. You said,
I was channeling. But no, I just wanted to also pick up on what you just mentioned about like doing what speaks from our souls, isn't it? Like what lights up our souls, like moving in this essence, towards this essence of love. And it comes back again to this like non-linearity. Like, we're taught that the only way to change the world is to challenge the systems, isn't it? And like to challenge the systems in this very direct and often what's the word? Like, we give up ourselves, isn't it? Like, we end up harming ourselves in the process of challenging these systems. We lose our boundaries in the process of challenging these systems far too often, and the system doesn't necessarily want to change, innit? Well, it obviously doesn't want to change, but there's so many other ways to transform the world, innit? And like, all I believe anyway, and I've come to more firmly believe, that the only thing that any of us actually have to do is like what we love, innit? Like whatever lights up our soul. And that could be, like, I've got a friend, he's a martial artist, and initially he wanted to go into like development stuff, like, yeah, in like global development, NGOs, etc., because he wanted to make an impact in the world. Absolutely hated it. And now he's doing his martial arts and he's like, yo, like, this is like my bliss, innit? And that's all I feel like we ever have to do. And like, there's still so many ways that his energy, him being in love with what he does, will change the world, but it's just not in this very like linear scientific way. In it, it's like we have the hypothesis and then we're going to have to figure out all of the steps and then this is the outcome. Like, no, like things happen in ways that we cannot even comprehend. And I feel like being able to take a step back and just be like, I don't actually know how to make the world a better place at large, innit? But what I do know how to do is do what I love. And do that with as much intention and as much integrity as possible. Like, yo, that's what I'm trying to do right now anyway.
Yeah, I feel like that's so, even just the idea of creating that capaciousness to find like what is it that we love in a world that might make us conflate like that love and satisfaction, or like love and power, for example. So sometimes it's like I speak to my brethren all the day, they're like, yo, I need money. All right, cool. Like, I want to be rich. Like, cool. So when you have the money, what would you do? I don't know, like, we get to this point where it's like money in itself won't feed me. And all of my friends, they always like, eventually we have reasonings and they're like, I feel like it's time. I feel like I need time. So a lot of my thinking is like, how do you create the capacity for time and to build like people's agency around how they think about time and how they choose to spend it. But sometimes I reach these internal contradictions where sometimes the work that we're trying to bring into being, or the practices that we're trying to explore and the infrastructures that we're trying to build to support that, are in direct conflict with what we consider due diligence or what is regarded as risky. And I say that thinking about something as simple and as basic as accounting. And I look at organizational forms as it's like loaded with contradictions. I say, what is it to be an organization that's registered in England and Wales and is accountable to our legal system? And we have to file reports to like Companies House and HMRC. And I always sit with those oppositions. And I remember speaking to a beloved friend, Jack Tan, who's an artist meets lawyer, and that is a massive understatement for him. And he was like, I think you need to find a way that aligns the things that we think about as due diligence with other forms of storytelling. If accounting is just a form of storytelling, what other ways do you want to tell the story of your organization? So we were like, I need to create an artist residency that helps us think about accounting in the Black imagination, so that I can find alignment between the things that we need to do and the things that feel like they're situated in our values and this love ethic. We create this residency, and it was like, we're gonna have to create a new language. So we like pulled together all of these artists to build this language with us, and we called it Graph. Andre Anderson's a great collaborator we work with, and he's always like, give a name to the thing and start to like build like and co-rehearse what it feels like to practice that. But I'm conscious of time. I'm running out of time, but I always think about some of those contradictions that it holds to walk in spirit, to align with purpose, to try and find love. Are there any contradictions or things that you're sitting with at the moment that you're like,
Do you know what? I feel like it's often not contradictions within myself because it feels so lucid, but it's contradictions in perspective of like a world that is grounded in like science, like Western science and Western philosophies, when things don't make sense to people because that's what they've been taught makes sense, innit? And I think we even do it within like radical spaces, because radical spaces in so many ways are still so informed by the knowledge system. And so, yeah, it's often not within myself, but within what I receive from outside, innit? Because to be in alignment is to be in alignment, innit? What about yourself before we close?
I feel like I have all the contradictions. I'm struggling with something like in myself that is actually there's a capaciousness that I feel like I want to pour into myself a little bit, and I haven't worked out how to do that.
Oh yeah, pour.
There's another thing where it's like for so long, I said Maya's been going for 10 years. I've been in sort of cultural practice and grassroots youth work before that. So for like 15 years, I feel like I've been like you know, fighting the fight and, you know, like saying all the things and coming with this high vim energy of like, fight, 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 anti, pro, that the last couple of years, things have started to happen where no one ever told you, like, when a yes comes, be ready for the yes. I've been so used to no's, I've been so used to knockbacks, I've been so used to pushbacks and fight, that my body and my mind were not prepared for yeses. And there's something that I'm really holding about, and I'm learning about myself, that in these yeses, I'm now having to learn new things about myself and notice what's surfacing, because now I'm having to sit with really uncomfortable truths about myself, and who am I if I'm no longer fighting and doors start to open or whatever else it is. Who am I? So I'm so grateful to be in community with people like yourself, organizations and infrastructures, you know, who we kind of share an ecosystem with, who are understanding that our no's make way for our yeses, and when we get our yeses, keep with the love, stick with the shit and keep with the love. Absolutely. So Melz, thank you so much for your time. What a blessing. And thank you so much, Farah, for holding the space for us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melz and Amahra. I could listen to you forever. You've covered in such a short amount of time. You guys covered so much, and yet we're so clear with what you landed with the room. You can see how much resonated with the audience by seeing the responses in the chat. You took us through imagination as freedom, seeing within each other possibilities and our capacities to love ourselves and each other, coming into our loving presence, our capacities to love ourselves deeply, and the importance of practice. That seems to be a common theme throughout the day, that the only way to do this work is through practice. And Melz, I loved what you shared about that the result of all of this decolonial work is in spiritual practice, and it's coming back to love and building infrastructures from that spirit, and the role of love as pragmatic intervention. I loved how you guys both took us on through different dimensions, but also around really pragmatic infrastructures that we can start building and practicing together. And there's so many ways to change the world, as you said, Melz, and you know, kind of being guided by what resonates with the spirit within us, and using love as that guiding light to guide us on how to create change, both within ourselves and within the world. Thank you so much. We now have time for a break. We'll be back at 2:10 for the next session. Thank you all, and see you soon.